Yeah. Sifra Lentin, she is joining us physically from here. She is in the Bombay History Fellow of Gateway House, Indian Council on Global Relations on Foreign Policy think tank in Mumbai. She was awarded the 2018-19 Herbert Kurtz Fellowship for Advanced Judaic Studies at the University of Pennsylvania for her ongoing project on Karachi's Jewish community. Her publications include Mercantile Bombay, A Journey of Trade and Finance and Enterprise, which was published in February 2022, and a legacy, the Dwarkadas Family of Bombay, March 2018. Over to you. You have your next 20 minutes is yours.
Where's the PPT?
The PPT, please.
I don't know where she's kept it. Just I don't know one. Yeah. Christina Mosai. Okay, got it. Yeah. Got it. Thank you, sir. Okay, how do I share it? Just wait. Yeah, the mic is on. Can you just help me share it? Oh, it's come on. Okay. Yeah, thanks. No, I prefer to face my audience. Then I know the expressions. Okay, thanks. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to today's talk. I want to first thank Mosai and the Kizuna Institute for inviting me to present on my little work on Bombay's Japanese legacy. So what I'm going to be doing actually is talking about Bombay and its presidency, which I personally feel was very, very foundational to India-Japan relations today, because it was the first sustained, expansive, modern commercial engagement between our two nations that took place in Bombay first, from the latter half of the 19th century to the first half of the 20th century, which was also a period of large-scale sustained mobility and circulation of people between our two nations. Now, this resulted in, which is the second half of my paper, I'll first talk about the context, about the trade relation, and then I will go on to the people-to-people interactions between the Japanese and Indian people resulting out of this trade. So it resulted in an Indian curiosity about Japanese culture, its language, and an admiration for its economic success, which has been talked about a lot today. Just wait. Okay. The main proposition of my paper is that the period from 1858 to 1939 in India-Japan relations, when viewed from the lens of British Bombay's cotton and cotton yarn trade with Japan, is the foundation of the two nations' special strategic bilateral relationship today. This period was known for, as I mentioned earlier, the people-to-people engagements and mobility. And what is important is that this period is well documented and remembered even today. In fact, most of my information, the previous speaker talked about the Isaboy family, talked about Sindhi merchants. I've spoken to these families also. In fact, the Isaboy family have got the entire history. So it was really nice that she brought it up. And so a lot of my information for today's talk actually is from oral interviews, a little archival work, and a lot of secondary information. So I personally feel that this kind of connect to this period adds a certain historical and cultural depth to the contemporary relationship today. Now, the reason for this proposition is that most 19th century Japanese businesses had a strong presence in colonial Bombay, and most of them have actually re-established themselves in our city in the 21st century. So this is my first idea. Notable among these, I think in the opening session, we had Mitsui Bussan, which is, of course, I have been told repeatedly, cannot be confused with Mitsui and Company today. They're two different corporate identities, but the legacy and history of Mitsui Company today is from Mitsui Bussan and its cotton buying department, Toyo Menka, which are the historic avatar of Mitsui today. Then there is the Yokohama Specie Bank, which was merged into the Bank of Tokyo and is today's MUFG Bank, which again has operations in Bombay. And then we have NYK, or Nippon Yusen Kaisha. I hope I'm getting the pronunciation right, a shipping company, which is today part of the Mitsubishi Keiretsu. I believe it's a big umbrella organization which has different companies under it. The second basis on which I've based my original proposition is that the enormous carrying trade in raw cotton and yarn from Bombay port to Japanese ports like Kobe and Yokohama, and to a lesser extent Yokohama later, was the foundation of Japan's first industrial revolution, which began with its textile mill industry. As we heard earlier, they decided to follow the Western model. And its ancillary manufacturing and services sectors like banking, insurance, and shipping. Bombay and its twin city of Karachi, which was part of Bombay Presidency, were nodal ports for the export of Indian cotton to Japan. By 1935 to 1936, Japanese cloth imports into India surpassed even Great Britain's, and that led to quite a few problems. So it was because of this trade, at first in cotton, which peaked in the 1920s, and later the import of Japanese mill-made cloths, that resulted in the settlement of a large Japanese community in the city, along with its attendant social, religious, and cultural life. Sorry. Okay, here this is a picture of one of Bombay's cotton greens. The second part of this paper is on Bombay's little known Japanese legacy, and I'm hoping to concentrate a little more on that, which is representative of the social and cultural ecosystem built in the early 20th century because of a sizable Japanese community in the city during this period. This is still used by the much smaller Japanese expat community in Mumbai today. And it includes the Japanese cemetery on Dr. E. Moses Road, the Japanese temple at Worli Junction, and the Japanese school, which was originally established in 1926. Now, Bombay's trade with Japan, and we've been hearing it through our conference since yesterday, began 10 years before the Meiji Restoration in 1868, when the powers of the Imperial Japanese Emperor were finally restored after more than 2.5 centuries of dominance by military dictators known as the Tokugawa shoguns. By 1633, Imperial Japan, in a manner of speaking, chose national seclusion from the rest of the world and only permitted the Dutch and the Chinese merchants to trade through its southern port of Nagasaki. By 1858, the Western powers led by the United States of America were demanding access to Japanese ports and markets, which resulted in Japan signing unequal treaties with these nations and opening the ports of Nagasaki, Yokohama, and Shimoda to foreign traders in that year. Now, initially, Japan's external trade was dominated by British, European, and American trading firms, along with the already established Chinese. So you had Japanese raw silks, teas, handloom, textile, paper, copper, coal, and iron were exported, while Chinese, US, and Indian cotton yarn, mill-made cloths, woolens, and other manufactures were imported. Now, initially, Bombay's big mercantile firms, who had branches in Chinese port cities like Canton, Guangzhou, Shanghai, and Hong Kong, which was ceded to the British in 1842, like the Tatas, the two Sassoon firms, that's the E.D. Sassoon and David Sassoon and Company, and even many smaller merchants, simply extended their Bombay China networks into Japan. One indication of the early entry of these Bombay firms was E.D. Sassoon and Company, which was amongst the first to open a branch in Yokohama as soon as the 1858 Harris Treaty was signed. It was in 1890s that saw the entry of the big Japanese firms like Mitsui Bussan, who began carrying a larger part of the cotton trade and generally the trade from the period just before the First World War. Now, this is an image I've taken from the archive of the first Japanese consul's letter to Lord Harris, asking for all the privileges that a consul gets, but really saying that I need an appointment with you to present my exequatur. So the entry of Mitsui Bussan in 1893 into Bombay was followed the next year by the establishment of Japan's first official mission in India, headed by Consul Dagoro Go. Got it right, I hope. Indicative of the importance of Imperial Japan attached to its India trade. In the same year, in 1894, when the consul was established in Mumbai, the Yokohama Specie Bank opened its first agency and became a branch in 1900 in the city. Now, what is important about the Yokohama Bank branch in Bombay is that most of the cotton brokers, I hate using the term native, but native cotton brokers had accounts in this branch of the Bombay branch of the Yokohama Specie Bank. So the 1890s was also a time when increasing amounts of ginned cotton or raw ginned cotton as against cotton yarn from Bombay's mills were being exported to Japan. This shift was due to the growth in the number of Japanese spinning mills. So every time we need to understand what's happening in Japan to understand the shift in trends of the export trade from Bombay. The first of which was the Osaka spinning mill, which began producing superior yarn compared to imports from Japan's textile mills centered in Kobe and Osaka. By the early 20th century, it was evident that Japanese mills enjoyed a marked advantage. Now, the marked advantage was due to a number of reasons. One was they had higher labor productivity. They had a lower cost of raw materials because they began sending their people out into the cotton hinterland to buy cotton directly from the cotton growing regions. They even sort of insinuated themselves into forward trading. So they managed to purchase cotton at a slightly marginally cheaper rate than what was being sold in the Bombay market. They had finer counts of cloth due to indigenous improvements in textile technology. There was the rationalization of the Japanese textile industry in 1921, and it also had a currency weighed in its favor because of two simultaneous events. One was the devaluation of the Japanese yen and Japan going off the gold standard in 1931, and it pegged its currency to the British pound. In comparison, India had no such choice. It could not devalue its currency. The Indian rupee was artificially kept high by the India office at £1.06 because it was advantageous to Great Britain. This impacted India's industrialization and encouraged cheaper Japanese exports into India, like cloth and Majolica tiles that were mentioned yesterday, as I learned yesterday, in fact, so I've added that in. Okay. Now, this became a turning point because Japan began looking to India and the Asian markets to sell its enormous surplus of finished goods. In Bombay, the cotton purchases of Japanese trading firms known as the Three Cottons or the Three Sons, Nippon Menka Kabushi Kaisha, Gosho Kabushi Kaisha, and Toyo Menka Kaisha were financed by a mix of foreign chartered banks led by HSBC, Japanese banks, largely YSB, that is Yokohama Specie Bank, who worked with the Bank of Bombay's rural branches and even native bankers in the cotton hinterland. The biggest advantage Japanese trading agencies enjoyed before 1926, when raw cotton exports from Bombay to Japan began declining, was that their raw cotton purchases in Bombay and direct purchases in the hinterland were underwritten by contracts with the Japanese mills. Now, this was an advantage they were soon going to lose because they had contracts in place for the purchase of a certain quantum of cotton. This stopped during the First World War when Japanese mills began purchasing all year round from the global markets. It has to be noted that these enormous raw cotton purchases were also exported to other overseas markets, but the Japanese mill contracts, as Professor Naoto Kagatani's work has noted, underwrote this trade. An indication of the size of this trade in 1913. An indication of the size of this trade in 1913 is evident from the yen value of the size of exports from India as compared to that from China. The India trade was 148 million yen, while the Chinese trade was just 16 million yen into Japan. So more importantly, in 2022-23, they dealt with 30% of India's cotton exports and even began selling it in Europe and China. So from this diagram, one can see the cotton export share at Bombay port for all the Japanese companies. So, I mean, I'm not going to explain it. It's there for everyone to see. Now, supporting this enormous trade in Bombay Presidency by 1925, we had 4 Japanese banks operating in Bombay, namely the Yokohama Specie Bank, which is today's MUFG Bank. We had the Bank of Taiwan when Taiwan was under Japanese rule. We had the Bank of Chosen, and we had the Sumitomo Bank. And I have a feeling, I'm not sure, but the Sumitomo Bank has a branch in Bombay today. It's there in Bombay. Okay. Now, what's on your screen, what you can see on the screen is a crest of the Tata family. Now, one of the earliest Indo-Japanese collaboration was that between Jamshedji Nasarwanji Tata, the founder of the Tata Group of Companies, and Nippon Yusen Kaisha, or Japan Mail Steamship Company. It was aimed at breaking what Jamshedji termed at that point in time an Indian Ocean shipping cartel led by Peninsular and Oriental Steam Navigation Company, the London-based shipping behemoth. Jamshedji, during a visit to Japan in 1893, signed a deal which had been negotiated by his cousin R.D. Tata, that is the father of J.R.D. Tata, with NYK, whereby he would ply 2 cargo ships, the Annie Barrow and the Lindisfarne, on the Bombay, China, Japan route, both ships flying the flag of Tata Lines, and NYK would ply 2 of theirs. As against a rate of 19 cubic tons, rupees 19 per cubic ton, being charged by P&O, Tata Lines charged 12. Now, this is a famous freight war that broke out in 1893, with P&O slashing its rates to rupees 1.8 per ton and making the unusual offer of carrying cotton goods to Japan free of charge. Loyal customers were given additional rebates. Most of Bombay's mill owners deserted Tata Lines by withdrawing their shipping contracts. However, the Japanese Cotton Buyers Association stood by him. But despite the Japanese backing, Tata incurred a loss of rupees 1 lakh and decided to close Tata Lines after just a year of operation. Now, all this was happening out of Bombay city because his base was in Bombay. His Japanese partner, NYK, however, became the first Japanese shipping line to establish itself on this lucrative route. And subsequently, a few years later, NYK came to an understanding with P&O and they sorted this out. So NYK became a regular feature on the shipping line. Now, the first Japanese investment in manufacturing in Mumbai was between Toyo Menka and a local syndicate headed by its broker and nationalist Marwadi trader Anandi Ram Podar in 1926. The Toyo Podar Cotton Mills Limited was the first manufacturing facility in the city to leverage Japanese textile technology and management ethics as against an all-pervasive British one. One 1927 report on the textile mill industry states the purchase of the diamond mill for the first time included the name of a Japanese syndicate in the list of mill owners in the town and island of Bombay. So very briefly, before I go on, I just want to explain this image on the screen. This is the Isaboy family, which the previous speaker spoke about, who had operations in Yokohama. Now, it turned out that my childhood friends were Isaboys, and their father grew up in Japan. So I interviewed him over the phone. They are in the US now. And he told me that they started a match company in Calcutta called Isavi Match Company. And he was in charge of that match company. They had two other companies using Japanese technology. But what was interesting, and I thought I'd just bring this out because, and this has to be studied a little more, was that they brought down Japanese women who were used to packing the matches to teach the Indian women how to sort and pack the matchsticks into the boxes. So these were the kind of collaborations that were happening, but which are not really sort of have been studied as yet. I've just got sort of, as I was telling Dr. Jain, is just the tip of the iceberg, literally, for me. Can I have a glass of water? How many minutes? 5 minutes. Oh, I'll be through. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the robust Bombay-Japan trade ensured an active circulation of people between the two countries, which naturally expanded into the cultural, political, and religious realms. These were snapped due to the Second World War and never recovered, at least for Bombay city. The Japanese expat community in our city today, which I inquired about with the consulate, is on an average just about, they stay for around 1 to 5 years, and it's much smaller. I mean, we don't have a number on how many Japanese were there in the 1920s. I've guessed that they were around 2,000, 2,500, but I may be wrong. But today, they range from around 550 to 700 people in the total Mumbai metropolitan region, compared to the larger numbers in the 1920s and 30s. But it is still possible to trace the history of Bombay's Japanese community during the latter half of the 19th and the early 20th century. The most endearing vestige, what you see on the screen, is the earliest photograph of the Japanese community. It's a 1908 photograph, which was shared with me. And this is actually the consecration ceremony of the cemetery that still exists on Haynes Road in Worli. So you can see on the left, the man with the folded hands in the namaste is actually Bhikshu, I'll tell you his name, is Bhikshu Gensho Hirota. And around him are all, you can see women in kimonos and Japanese men who were all residents of Mumbai. Now, Bhikshu Hirota has said that I reached Bombay station and by Ghoda Gadi, reached the site where I met Japanese people. And in the evening, I went to the Japanese Gymkhana and did a memorial service. Now, this is the Japanese Gymkhana. It hasn't exactly been pulled down, and it is today's Woodhouse Gymkhana. So it was a place, and it is something that is referred to constantly by visitors or religious people who come to Mumbai. Now, another vestige of this Japanese legacy is that this cemetery has got a stamba. I forgot to put the photograph of the two stambas of the cemetery, and I couldn't find it on my computer. But anyway, I have it. But the older of the two stambas is actually, it is a buff-colored one. And this cemetery and the establishment of the Japan Buddha Order, or the Nichiren or Nippozan Moiji Temple in Bombay are related. Because when Reverend Fuji Guruji arrived in Mumbai, I hope I've just got a few more minutes, I'll be winding up. Arrived in Mumbai, he built a little jhopri, which is still existing, or a hut, where he prayed for the return of the Buddha Dharma to India, because he felt that India was under colonial rule because Buddha Dharma had fled from the Holy Land. So he had come here, and he's an important figure as far as Bombay is concerned as regards India-Japan relations. Now, I just want to show you, this is a photograph taken from the Bombay Chronicle, and it shows Fuji Guruji with an uchaiva, I can't pronounce it, uchuva deiku. It's a hand fan-like drum, and he's waiting for Gandhiji to get off the ship at Alexandria at the Ballard Estate Pier. And this photograph is taken on the 28th of December, 1931. And I was told that he actually, when Gandhiji got off the ship, he was actually accompanied him and was beating on this drum. Now, Fuji Guruji was actually actively reached out to Indian nationalist leaders, especially Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru. He stayed at Gandhi's Wardha ashram for 2 months and interacted with Gandhi on a wide range of subjects. They also disagreed on a wide range of subjects, especially Japan's invasion of China. So it was a conversation over a period of 2 months, sporadic conversation that they had. It was when he was at Wardha that Fuji Guruji expressed the desire to build a Nippon Moiji temple, or Japan Buddha Order temple, and an idea that was given wings by the nationalist and businessman J.K. Birla. The construction of this temple began, but it was disrupted by the war and was finally completed in 1952. Now, this is a view of the inside of the temple, and it is still a very active temple and still serving its purpose. Now, this is a picture of the contemporary Japanese community. They get together every November at the cemetery. And this is Bhikshu Morita-san, who conducts the ceremonies every November at the cemetery. Okay. Now, in conclusion, I just want to say that Mumbai may not be a major hub for Japanese expat residents, yet the city has played a seminal role in cementing trade between the two nations in the mid-19th and 20th century. This needs to be studied holistically, bringing in the political, social, religious, and cultural confluences. Unlike other foreign immigrant communities, most Japanese who resided in Bombay during the 19th and early half of the 20th century worked for Japanese companies. And I have studied other immigrant communities like the Chinese, the Baghdadis. So I know that most of these people, if you see their residential addresses, they're all affiliated to some company or the other. Not many have arrived on their own. It is striking that they were able to insinuate themselves with the help of local brokers into the supply chains of the hinterland. Lastly, British India's key role in Japan's first industrialization, through its voluminous exports of yarn and cotton and later import of Japanese cloth, hastened Japan's rise as an industrial power in the pre-1939 period. A major port was Bombay and Karachi. What needs to be studied closely is technology sharing and the application of Japanese manufacturing processes on the factory floor during this period. Thank you so much.
Thank you.